The trail looked simple when I started, just a narrow path cutting through the trees, winding deeper into the forest. It was the kind of place people go when they want quiet. Tall pines everywhere, the smell of damp soil, and that deep green light that filters through the leaves when the sun is high. I had done hikes like this before. Nothing extreme, nothing dangerous, just a long walk through the woods to clear my mind. The map at the entrance showed a loop trail. According to the sign, it was supposed to take about 3 hours to complete. That seemed reasonable. I had water, a small backpack, and plenty of daylight. So I started walking. At first, everything felt calm. The forest was alive with small sounds, wind moving through the branches, birds somewhere high in the canopy, the occasional snap of a twig under my boots. The trail itself was easy to follow. Packed dirt, a few exposed roots, and the occasional wooden marker nailed to a tree, pointing the way forward. I checked the time once or twice, but I wasn't worried about it. The sun was still high and bright. The air was cool but comfortable. It felt like a perfect afternoon. After about an hour, the forest became thicker. The trees grew closer together, and the light dimmed slightly as the canopy overhead became denser. The path narrowed, twisting more sharply between rocks and fallen branches, but the trail was still there, still obvious. So I kept going. Another 30 minutes passed. That's when something changed. At first it was subtle. The trail started to look less clear. Not gone, but faint. The dirt path that had been easy to see earlier was now covered with patches of leaves and pine needles. It blended more with the surrounding forest floor. I slowed down. Sometimes trails do that. They fade and reappear depending on the terrain. I wasn't alarmed yet. I kept walking, but within a few minutes the path seemed to split into several directions. Faint openings between trees that could all be trails. Or none of them. I stopped. I turned around and looked behind me. That's when the first uneasy feeling crept in. The direction I had come from didn't look familiar anymore. The forest looked exactly the same in every direction. Tall trees, dark soil, green shadows, no landmarks, no clear trail, just forest. I took out my phone. No signal. That didn't surprise me. Most forests like this don't have coverage, but I had hoped the GPS map might still work. It loaded slowly, then froze. I stared at the screen for a moment before slipping the phone back into my pocket. Okay, I told myself, think. The best option when you lose a trail is usually simple. Turn around and retrace your steps. So I started walking back the way I thought I had come. At first it felt right. The terrain looked similar. A fallen log here, a patch of moss there. I moved slowly, trying to recognize details, but the longer I walked, the more uncertain I became. The forest wasn't giving me any clues, and something else was happening. The light was changing. When I looked up through the trees, the sun had shifted lower in the sky. The forest floor was darker now. Shadows stretched longer between the trunks of the trees. I checked the time again. I had been walking for nearly 4 hours. That's when I realized something that made my stomach tighten. I should have already finished the trail, but I wasn't back at the entrance, and I wasn't on any clear path. I was somewhere in the middle of the forest, and I didn't know where. The air felt colder now, not dramatically, but enough that I noticed it when the wind moved between the trees. I kept walking, faster now, trying to find something, anything that looked like a trail marker or a sign. But the forest only grew thicker. Branches snagged at my backpack. Low shrubs scratched against my legs. The ground became uneven, forcing me to watch every step. Then the sun dipped lower. The light in the forest faded rapidly. Forests don't grow dark slowly the way open landscapes do. The canopy blocks the sky, and once the sun drops low enough, the shadows swallow everything. Within minutes, the entire place looked different. The green light turned gray. The distance between trees became harder to judge, and every sound seemed louder. I stopped walking again because suddenly the situation felt real. I wasn't just off the trail, I was lost, completely lost, and night was coming. I took a deep breath and tried to calm down. Panic doesn't help in situations like this. It burns energy and clouds your thinking. So I forced myself to think logically. Wandering blindly through the forest in the dark would only make things worse. People who get lost often make the same mistake. They keep moving, hoping to stumble onto the right direction. But movement without direction just spreads the problem further. So I made a decision. I would stay where I was, or at least close to it. If someone realized I hadn't returned from the hike, search teams would likely start from the trailhead and move outward. If I kept walking randomly through the forest, the chances of crossing their path would drop dramatically. The smartest thing to do was wait for morning. That thought was comforting for about 10 seconds. Then I realized what waiting meant. It meant spending the night in the forest, alone. I found a tree with a wide trunk and sat down beside it. The ground was cold and damp beneath me. The forest around me slowly faded into darkness, and as the last light disappeared from the sky, a different world seemed to wake up. The sounds began first, rustling in the distance, branches shifting, leaves crunching somewhere far away, animals moving through the undergrowth. During the day, those sounds blend into the background. But in darkness, every noise feels like it's right next to you. I turned on the small flashlight on my phone. The narrow beam cut through the darkness, illuminating patches of bark and moss. But beyond that circle of light, the forest remained black, completely black. Time passed slowly. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. The temperature dropped further. Cold air settled into the forest floor, and I pulled my jacket tighter around me. I tried to stay awake. Sleep in the forest when you're unprepared can be dangerous. Cold, animals, or simple disorientation can turn a bad situation worse. So I sat there listening, watching, waiting. At one point I heard something large moving somewhere beyond the trees. Heavy footsteps, slow, deliberate. My flashlight beam swept through the darkness, catching only tree trunks and shadows. The sound faded after a few moments. Maybe a deer, maybe something else. The forest didn't tell me. Eventually, the sounds blended together again into a constant background rhythm. Wind through branches, leaves shifting. Distant movement. Hours passed like that. The night felt endless, but eventually something began to change. The darkness softened. The black sky above the trees turned gray, then pale blue. And finally, the first thin rays of sunlight filtered through the forest canopy. Morning. The forest looked different again in daylight, less threatening, more familiar. I stood up slowly, stretching stiff muscles. The cold night air had left my body tense and tired, but I felt something else too. Relief. Because daylight meant orientation. Sunlight meant direction. I looked around carefully. For the first time since the afternoon, I could see far enough to recognize patterns in the terrain. A slight slope in the ground. A line of trees growing thinner in one direction. I started walking that way, slowly, carefully. And after about 40 minutes, I saw something I had never been happier to see. A wooden trail marker nailed to a tree. The path was faint, barely visible, but it was there. I followed it. Within another hour, I reached the main trail again, and not long after that, I saw the parking area through the trees, the same place where the hike had started the day before. The forest looked peaceful again, calm, beautiful, like it had never been dangerous at all. But I knew better. Because sometimes the most dangerous places don't look dangerous. They look quiet, inviting, and ordinary until the moment you realize you don't know the way back. Se quiser, eu já posso criar também 12 prompts documentais perfeitos para as imagens desse vídeo, thumbnail extremamente clicável, título e descrição otimizados para viralização. Isso vai manter o padrão que você já está usando no canal.